It may surprise you to know that I was anorexic for 2.5 years. In today's podcast, I want to share what I learned from my experience with anorexia and how that shaped my viewpoint towards nutrition and its role with developing strength and an ideal body composition. For me, my journey started on my 15th birthday. I was play fighting with a friend and they said the comment, well, at least I'm not fat. At the time, I wouldn't have thought of myself as being fat. I certainly wasn't in good shape. I wasn't what you would consider overweight. I would be what you consider skinny fat. So in a t-shirt and shorts, I would have looked quote unquote normal, maybe a little like hefty, have a little bit of chunk. I wouldn't have thought of myself as fat. Like I didn't have, like my belly wasn't out over my shorts. My belly didn't really stick out more than like my chest or anything, but I had a very soft appearance overall. So when they said, at least I'm not fat, I didn't like the feeling of that. However, that kind of internalized for me. I remember thinking to myself like, dang, I didn't think I was fat and I don't like the feeling of being called fat, and therefore I'm then mad at myself that I allowed myself to be in a condition that somebody can think of that of me. So I internalized it and blamed myself for allowing myself to be in a state in which somebody could say something that I didn't know would be quote unquote true of me, but if somebody else thought it would be true or society as a whole thought it would be true of me, I didn't like that they could say that and it would be quote unquote being seen as being true. So if I didn't like something about me being true, that was my fault. I remember telling myself, well, this is, well, I'm gonna cuss, even though I cuss all the time probably in here. don't notice it. But I remember thinking to myself, like, that's bullshit. I'm so mad at myself that I allowed myself to become something that I would be embarrassed by. So on my 15th birthday, I decided I'm gonna do 250 push-ups and 250 sit-ups every single night, and that's gonna get me in good shape. Now, this was coming from a kid who didn't exercise at all. I didn't know it at the time, but I couldn't even do 20 push-ups in a row, and I couldn't do 20 sit-ups without my abs cramping. So to set a goal of 250, and I have no clue why I picked that number, by the way, it just kind of sounded like if I did that, how big of a change would that make? It would be a pretty significant change. So this was a kid who couldn't do 20 push-ups, couldn't do 20 sit-ups, and here I am setting a goal of 250 a day. But I remember thinking to myself is if I did the push-ups, my chest is going to grow because I just thought the stimulus of exercise grew the muscle. And if I did the sit-ups, I would lose all the belly fat. So in my mind, it makes kind of like no sense looking back at it now, is that exercise for one body part would make it grow, but the exercise for the other body part would make the fat over top of it shrink. It was, a little chaotic. But coming from a 15-year-old mind where you don't know anything science-wise or fact-wise, it just kind of made sense is if I'm active, muscles will be bigger, fat will be less. And then I paired that with, well, if I just don't eat anything, I also will lose a lot of body fat. So that's where my anorexia started. I started with, I didn't typically eat breakfast anyhow. I didn't find out until way later in life, but I had an esophagus issue that when I woke up, I would often have GERD while sleeping, and I had sleep apnea, which I didn't know at the time either. So I would wake up and my throat would be sore. So I typically didn't eat breakfast anyhow. So now I just definitely didn't eat breakfast at that time. That was kind of my new goal at 15 is I'm just not gonna eat breakfast at all. When I go to lunch, no one really pays attention in my friend group, like what I'm eating or not eating. So I would get to school lunch, push things around, but I would try not to eat anything. That way, again, if I'm not eating, my body will burn off the fat that's on it. So I would try not to eat, and if I did eat, it might be a bite here, a bite there. Knowing what I know now calorie-wise, I would be amazed if I ever got even over 200 calories because it would just be 2 or 3 small bites while talking with friends. Enough that I'm part of the group, but I'm not standing out, if that makes sense. And then I would do the rest of the school day. I would often be in some type of after-school activity, whether it was a sport or music. I did play a couple different instruments when I was younger. And then I would go home and I would have dinner with my family. I knew that I needed to eat in front of my parents Otherwise, that would definitely raise a red flag, and that would be an issue. I didn't want to hear about all the, blah, 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 blah. I didn't want to hear them trying to help take care of me. So definitely should have involved them and brought them into the worries and concerns I was having. But at the time, I didn't know any better. So I was operating basically at a place of embarrassment. I was embarrassed about the way I looked. So I would be embarrassed about having to ask someone's help towards me having to change that. So it had to do with just low self-confidence and embarrassment. So I would eat dinner, but again, try to eat as little as I could without raising any red flags with them. And then I would go and start my evening activity, starting my push-ups and sit-ups. In the entire first year, from 15 to 16, I only missed 10 days. 7 of those, I was on a Boy Scout trip. We were hiking the Appalachian Mountains, which was crazy. It's like freaking 100 miles of hiking in like 7 days. It was awful. I'm not a big outdoors person, so that one was pretty rough. But that was 7 days I missed my goal, and then I missed it 3 random other days throughout the year. But 15 to 16, I did the 250 push-ups and 250 sit-ups every single day. And it took me 2 to 3 hours because I would do 20 push-ups. Well, I couldn't even do 20. So maybe I'd get 15, 16 push-ups, 15, 16 crunches, roll over, try to do a couple push-ups, roll over, try to do a couple sit-ups. And then I would, at that time, my parents were helping me buy lifting magazines. So Men's Health, Muscular Development, those kind of things. So I'd read an article, do more push-ups, do more sit-ups, read an article, do more push-ups, do more sit-ups. I had a video game, a PlayStation at the time. I think like PlayStation, Nintendo 64, or whatever was out at that time. Might have actually been regular Nintendo. Holy crap. I think it was actually regular Nintendo, like old-fashioned, just first gen Nintendo. So I might play like a little bit of Nintendo, and then I would do more push-ups and sit-ups. But it would take me 2 to 3 hours to kind of get through everything. And that was my evening. So during that time, from 15 to 16, as you can imagine, I didn't get a chest like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I didn't get six-pack abs. It was very depressing, very sad. I did grow, I think, an extra inch or so at that time. Like, I started this little adventure. I think I was 5'6", around 165 pounds. And I had more body fat than I have now at 265. So at 165, I had no visible muscle tone, definition, anything. You couldn't see if I had abs. I couldn't even tell you what the shape of them were. It was like a little roll of fat that you could pinch, but it was over my entire body. I was looking back at it now, I likely had some type of hormonal issue. And if you go back to my childhood, I had a lot of issues in and out of the hospital as a child with development concerns. So I was probably having some type of hormone issue because I had a thin layer of water and fat over my whole body. And it just wasn't a great aesthetic look. So from 15 to 16, I did all these push-ups and sit-ups. I ate absolutely nothing, but my body didn't change. Then, as I was getting closer to my 16th birthday, from reading all the magazines with people, bodybuilders and people lifting weights, I was like, man, that's what's missing. What's missing is I'm not lifting weights. I'm lifting myself, but myself isn't enough. I gotta lift heavy things. So I asked my parents for a weight set as like a birthday gift. Now, back then, it was a very expensive weight set. It was $600. So for our budget, that was like, it had to be my birthday, my Christmas, like Happy Easter the next year. And you better be on really damn good behavior because it's a lot of money. So we got it was kind of like a bench press, but off the back side of it, you could squat and do dips. And off the front side was leg extension, leg curl thing. We got a couple machines from some neighbors of mine, which was really awesome. Some really old, I think they were like Marcy, M-A-R-C-Y machines, but they were pretty cool. Cable driven with some plastic weights and stuff. And then I got easy curl bar, plate weights. I think it was like 300 pounds of plate weight. So I started lifting weights on my 16th birthday. And I thought that would be, the kicker. That would be the thing that would really move the needle. So I trained like an absolute psychopath. I was operating from a space of hating myself, hating my body, and I was going to punish it into change. Apparently, 250 push-ups and 250 sit-ups wasn't enough, so I needed some pretty severe punishment. So I would do exercises. I remember I would do bicep curls, to where I would literally like involuntarily drop the bar out of my hand. So I would put on a weight that I couldn't even do maybe 20 total reps with, and I would just sit there and hold it and then curl, hold it and curl, hold it and curl. And I would not let myself put the bar down. And I would tell myself, like, you're weak because of this. If you set this bar down, that is why you're fat. That's why you're, oh my gosh, you can think of all the self-hate somebody would tell themselves. I would say all of that to myself and just keep curling and curling and curling and curling. And then eventually my hands would get like numb. Everything would feel so pressured from all the fluid issues. And then eventually I would drop the bar, and then I would be satisfied that I did something really good, but I'd be mad at myself that I dropped the bar. Could I have done a little bit more? Could I have done one more rep? If I did one more rep, maybe that was what was, going to help me get the next goal. We also had a heavy bag, like a punching heavy bag, and it was canvas, which means it had some texture to it. My parents were cool and they got me gloves for it, but I remember every once in a while, if I was lifting weights, I would want to like hit the heavy bag as like cardio between weightlifting, but I didn't want to put on the gloves. So I would just punch the bag, but since it was canvas, it would start to rub my knuckles raw, and I would get like a little bit of blood coming out of my knuckles and a little bit of blood on the bag. Well, again, I'm a psychopath, and to me that was like, oh, this is like a visual representation of me leaving my old self. The more pain I can soak in with the lifting weights, the more blood on the bag I can leave. The more, like, the harder I work, the more I'm going to leave that old self behind. The more of the positive change I'm going to make, the more of the new me that I want to be is going to come out. So I would punch the bag, and there'd be blood marks everywhere. It wasn't ever like gushing, but it was like brush burn, like a brush burn type cut on the knuckles. And that was very satisfying. So I would curl or do bench press or tricep movements, chest presses, back exercises. I did do leg extensions, leg curls. I had no idea what I was doing technique-wise though, so everything probably looked like trash. But it was a ton of effort. And I would do that every single day. So from the day I got my weight set till, my gosh, I don't think I missed a day of exercise. I've gone over a year of exercising multiple times every single day. And that would count, like, we went on vacation, I would do bodyweight exercises like the push-ups and sit-ups and things. But I've done, consecutive years in the 20, I'm 42 now, so 26 years. The most time I've ever taken off has been like a Monday to a Monday, and I did that twice. Once was because I had really bad inflammation and I was actually throwing up from the inflammation that was in my shoulders and elbows and wrists. I remember at one point I was trying to tighten a bolt on a machine and I threw up because the pain in my elbow was so bad from the inflammation of trying to turn the bolt. And then the other week was emotional stress. I was having really bad anxiety, the first time in my life I'd ever experienced anxiety, and I felt like just for some reason the exercise just like flared up the anxiety, and I think it was because that self-hate, that changing desire, also just nervous system stress. Lifting weights does stress your nervous system, and if my nervous system was already, stressed and peaked from the anxiety, that was probably making it worse as well. So I just went for a walk. So during both of those week spans, I just went for a walk on those days rather than lifting weights. But through the 16 to 17 years, 16 birthday roughly to about 17 and 17 and a half, I started realizing, okay, lifting weights isn't the answer. So at first, from 15 to 16, I didn't eat any food, and I did push-ups and sit-ups, but that didn't make the change that I wanted. But I didn't equate it to being the food. I thought it was, well, I'm not doing heavy resistance training. It's the fact that the training's only body weight. I only weigh 165 pounds. It's not enough to make my body change. So then I lifted weights, and I went from 16 to about 17 and a half. And I remember starting to think to myself, well, damn, nothing's changing now either. I still look skinny fat. I'm still 165 pounds. I had shot up to about 6 foot tall, so I gained 6 inches in the journey from 15 to about 17 and a half. I went from 5'6" to 6 foot tall. And man, if I would have been eating, good God, I could have been like maybe 6'2", 6'3", 6'4". That would have been nice. Oh, who knows? But I somehow still gained 6 inches, and but I stayed 165. So at 17 and a half, I was getting ready to graduate high school and looking into going to college. And I was like, well, I'm about to meet a whole new set of people. I don't want this skinny fat look. You know, no one's going to respect me. I don't respect myself yet. I just don't have any confidence. I'm going to meet all these new people in like a crappy version of myself. What can I do? Well, now I had about 2.5 years of reading magazines, and we did get the internet. My senior year of high school, we got the internet, and I started watching videos from RX Muscle in the Iron Asylum. And they were bodybuilding interviews. They would basically film a bodybuilder working out, and then they would do an overlay, an audio overlay of Dave Palumbo and the bodybuilder going back and forth and asking questions. And I noticed they always talked about protein. And I was like, okay, so apparently protein is what muscles are made of. So when I was doing all those push-ups and my chest wasn't growing, it was because I didn't have any material for the chest to grow with. When I'm lifting all these weights and I'm beating up the muscle, I'm tearing up the muscle, I'm not giving it any material to build the muscle with. So I started thinking of it like, if I want to build a brick house, I have to have bricks. It makes sense. I had all the workers in the world. I had all the people available to build the house, but I didn't have any material. So I was doing all these workouts, but I didn't have any material to build the muscle with. So I did allow myself to start eating protein. I started having protein. I still was kind of crappy with breakfast because my throat was really bad. I didn't get that fixed till I was in my late 30s, by the way. So I had really bad throat pain. And so I didn't have breakfast, but I did start eating lunch. I started having protein shake after workout because the anabolic window at the time was, you know, hyped to be super important. So I was having protein after my workouts. I was having dinner with my parents, and I would eat after the workout too if I felt like my protein was too low. At first, I started kind of experimenting with some protein, and then I started realizing, okay, protein isn't working. Like just protein alone isn't working. And again, the magazines were talking about the bodybuilders having carbohydrates. And I was like, oh, you know, why would aren't carbs, if I eat carbs, I'm not going to burn off the fat I have. Well, I started realizing like, okay, protein is the material the house is built out of, like the muscles are built out of. So if I'm building a brick house, I have bricks. But who's fueling the workers? Like who's giving the energy for the workers to be able to do that? So I have all this protein coming in, but my body doesn't have any energy to convert that protein to muscle. So I started realizing like, oh, that's why they're eating the carbohydrates. So my mind started thinking like, okay, well, if I eat fats, I get fat. So that must be the problem, is if I eat fats, I get fat. But if I eat carbohydrates, that helps to fuel the protein converting to muscle. So I need the protein because that's what the muscle's made of. But then I need carbohydrates because that's the energy that's going to allow the protein to be converted to muscle. And as long as I avoid fats, I must be, that'll probably make it okay. I'll probably do better then. So I ended up reading a magazine article by Lee Priest, a bodybuilder from Australia. And he was saying what his daily diet was in the off season. And it was like a whole chicken breast, a loaf of bread, and a gallon of milk. And I was about to go off to college, which meant that I was kind of like going to be on my own schedule and doing everything my own way. So I had my own car. So thank you, Mom and Dad. They got me a car. And so now I was in charge of my own schedule. And I was like, well, I can get to a grocery store or a gas station or somewhere for milk. Now, I don't know if I'm going to roast a chicken every day. And to me, the bread was like, that's just carbs. But that's like empty carbs. There's no protein paired with it. There's nothing else. Like I just thought of it as kind of like a lazy carb. Like it wasn't going to do more for me. So I was like, well, I can do the milk. And looking back at it now, with what I know now, the milk was actually really helpful to calm my throat. My throat was burning all the time, and I didn't know that actually. So I had acid reflux 24/7 all day, every day, and I never realized it because it was just my reality. It was what I always grew up with. I never knew that my throat shouldn't feel like that. So when I set the goal, that was when I started the goal of drinking a gallon of milk a day. As I read that Lee Priest magazine article, and I was like, well, the milk is going to give me protein. It has carbohydrates in it, which unfortunately are sugars, and I did fat-free milk, so that way I could avoid the fats. So I drank a gallon of milk a day. And yes, that was too much. Yes, it made me fat. Yes, that was a horrible decision. Composition-wise, but it made sense with where my mind was, where my knowledge was at that time. So it's unfortunate. I wish I would have known more so I could have been more efficient with my efforts. So here I am going into 18 years old. I put 3 years into this, and unfortunately it was 3 years of just taking big fat guesses and doing everything really inefficiently. I absolutely wish I could have had those 3 years back and been able to do things quote unquote the right way, because those were so important developmental wise years, 15 to 18. And like I said, I still somehow grew 6 inches. I wonder what I could have grown with better food. I could have gotten 3 years of building muscle rather than 3 years of starving my muscle away. It's just really depressing to look back now and realize I wasted that time. But I did start then switching over to drinking a gallon of milk a day, and I actually did that for 2 years straight. So yes, I drank a gallon of milk for 2 years every single day. Pretty wild. Now, I might have to come back and make a podcast about that. But today's podcast is about my story, my experience of being anorexic, which I would say definitively changed once I started drinking a gallon of milk a day. So from 15 to 17 and a half, though, is when I was really avoiding all foods. And at 17 and a half was when I accepted that I had to start bringing in protein, I had to start bringing in carbs. And that was essentially what I learned in a very harsh way. And unfortunately, it took me 2.5 years to learn it. Is that if I want a lean physique, if I want better performance, whether that's stronger, faster, more explosive, if I just want my body to be what I want it to be in a performance aesthetic way, I need protein. I absolutely do. I have to make sure I'm eating enough protein. And right now, the general recommendation overall is between 0.6 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight, and that's leanish body weight, not, if you have 20% body fat, you probably don't want to use that body weight. You want to use a leaner body weight, whatever you'd look like, how much you'd weigh if you had six-pack abs, for example. Or let's just say a good beach body. So maybe around 12, 15% fat for men, around maybe 18, 20, 22% body fat for females. Those are going to be relatively lean numbers. That's around the body weight that you would want to use. And it's 0.6 if you don't lift weights at all, so I don't recommend that. And then up to 1.2 for sure if you're lifting weights. Some clients I have go over that. It's rare. Most clients, if they want to build muscle and have good performance, we're around 1 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight for protein. So I learned that. A really hard way is that muscle does not grow if you do not have the material that it grows with. Can't build a brick house if I don't have bricks. Then the second big lesson I learned was that carbohydrates are necessary. Oh my gosh. Carbohydrates do not make you fat. Overeating fats and carbohydrates, like dietary fats and carbohydrates, those are our energy nutrients. Carbohydrates, you can think of them as faster source of energy. Fats are a slower source of energy. If you overeat the combination of those two, then that's what equates to, over time, a gain in body fat, is you're bringing in more energy than you're using. But there is an amount of energy that you need to have at first. So there's an amount of carbohydrates that you need to have to optimize performance and muscle building. And then there's a really large gap before that would then become at risk of gaining body fat. So carbs are absolutely necessary. The amount of carbohydrates, if you've ever heard any of my past podcasts, you'll recognize I've never really given any amount of, per pound of body weight, you should have X number of carbohydrates, because I found that to be incredibly variable among individuals. I have some people that will be, the term we could use is carb sensitive, others are not. I've had some people, they can have 2 times their body weight in carbohydrates a day, and that's baseline maintenance diet. I have other people, if they did that, they're going to be a puffy mess and they're just not going to feel good. So we're trying to figure out, really what we want to do is we want to determine energy calories and not pull apart carbs and fats. We want to kind of lump them together as energy calories. So I would have my total calorie amount, I would subtract the calories equated from protein, and then the remaining calories in my target are going to come from carbs and fats. If I'm more active, I'm probably going to have more carbs at that time. If I'm less active, I'm probably going to have more fats at that time for whatever the time of the meal is. But that's how I differentiate and kind of decide my carbs and fats. And that works really well for myself, for all my clients. I've worked with, IFBB and Natural Pros for aesthetics. I've worked with national and world record holders for powerlifting. I've worked with professional athletes, Olympic athletes, CrossFit Games athletes, you name it, and everybody in between. And that system works perfectly. It doesn't need to change. It's exactly what we need it to do. But that's what I've learned is typically, if you want to have an idea of where to start, is go to calculator.net. There's a BMR calculator. You can put in all your personal information. It gives you what your BMR is. I typically equate the BMR to about 70% of my total needs, and I would start the person at that calorie amount. So whatever, if you do the calculation to where BMR is 70% of that number, you would then start with that number as your maintenance calories, see how your body responds, and then adjust from there. That's a good way to do it for everybody listening to this if you want to find that out yourself. And then protein, like we said, is around 1 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight if you're really trying to build muscle. However, sometimes that does change. It depends on the person's activity level. If they're super active and they tend to be a really good genetic builder, we might not need that much protein. We might lean more into carbohydrates to have better daily energy and better performance energy. So it really depends on what that person's goal is and how their body responds. And then what I learned for fats is that they're necessary for health. They have a lot of good things for us. They grow our hair, skin, nails, a lot of other good things. They play along with your hormone profile as well. So there's a baseline amount of fats that are helpful in order to have optimized health and feeling good and having the body operate the way it should. And all that is going to be necessary for us to build the amount of muscle that we want and get the body response that we want from our stimulus and training. So that's essentially what I learned is from anorexia is eating less doesn't help. There is actually a too low of calorie intake that you will not lose body fat. Your body does get into a protective situation, especially if you're chronically under eating. If you miss like your food for one day, it's not like your body goes into like starvation mode and needs to protect its organs. But if you're anorexic and you're seriously under eating, you're below your BMR chronically over time, your body does start to prioritize holding on to fat, fat energy, sorry, body fat, and it then does start to let muscle be broken down and not repaired because again, you're not giving it the material it needs. So what I've worked with people who have clinical diagnosis of anorexia. I've worked with psychiatrists who will recommend patients to me so I can start to teach them how to eat healthy and exercise healthy and not use exercise as a punishment, not use anorexic, basically not use exercise as their form of anorexia, is trying to out-exercise their food. So I've gone through a lot of situations, like I've gone through my own personal experience with it, I've gone through clinical experiences with it, and then just regular population. And what you will see is if a person chronically undereats over time, they will lose weight. They'll lose more and more and more weight, but they'll be soft. They'll have a little bit of pudge on the inside of their thighs, maybe their lower back, maybe their glute fold. Under the bottom of their glutes are going to be loose. They're going to have a little bit of fat there. They might have a little bit of fat in the pooch of their belly, right under their belly button. They're going to have fat up under their armpits. It's just, there's going to be these pockets of fat that just don't go away. And the longer and longer and longer they undereat, they're just losing more and more muscle, but those pockets of fat do not go away. So that is the big thing that I try to teach the clients I work with who are chronic undereaters, is that it will not get better. Your composition is going to stay the same at some point, and then you're just going to lose muscle, and you're going to get lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. You're going to lose weight, but that weight is coming from muscle loss. You're going to lose bone density, but that doesn't equate to any weight. Like you're not going to lose like bone weight, but you're going to get more and more unhealthy. And I've had clients who were had to go to the hospital for some issues, and or their family was threatening to like take them to the hospital because that's how gaunt and beat down and just starved their bodies were. So if you've struggled with undereating, I actually know what it feels like. It can be surprising to hear that if you see any of our other videos on social media, Instagram or YouTube or whatever. I'm 6 foot tall, 265 pounds. I've been as heavy as 300 pounds and still no belly over my belt. I still looked pretty decent at 300 pounds. But I've been everywhere. I've been that 6 foot tall, 165 skinny fat kid who can't see any lines or no muscles. I tried starving that kid away. It didn't work. I then started eating food, lifting weights, and I worked my way all the way up to 300 pounds, being able to do strongman competitions. And now I'm dieting back down. I'm around 265. And you can see like the edging of my abs now. And I'm looking closer and closer to the way I'd really like to look. And that's the goal, is diet down and maybe eventually do a bodybuilding show, which would be pretty cool. I just wanted to share my journey with anorexia, what I learned along the way. And if anybody else is having any struggles where maybe they identified with how they felt at any point in my journey, if you're at that spot, ask me any questions. Reach out. I'm happy to help. There's no judgment whatsoever. I promise you that, because I've been where you are. So I'll help you get out of it, and hopefully a hell of a lot more efficiently than how I did. I'd love to be able to help people avoid the emotional, mental pain that I experienced, and the time that was wasted, and the effort that I was so willing to give the effort, but I just didn't have the right things to give the effort to. So if you're interested in any of that help, reach out. You can reach out on our website. Our website is www.c3method.com. The 3 is spelled out THREE, so it's CTHREE method.com. Okay, if you need anything, let me know. I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening, and thank you for watching.